Welcome back to Jay and Dave Sports Bar. It returns for another week. The Broncos are back in action, traveling down to San Jose State, who we actually kind of have to take a little more seriously this year, I'd have to say.
It's weird to say that. You kind of go back and look at your preseason predictions, and some of them were outstanding, which they usually are. But then there are some that are very bad. There's always one. There's always one in hindsight. Mm-hmm. Fresno State a couple years ago, They were picked last. San Jose State has a shot at a bowl game, which is
for them, that is like the biggest deal.
That's as impressive as anything in the conference so far, to be frank. Because
I thought you were going to say country.
No, not
honestly, given their circumstance, man, it really might be.
Well, they'd won 3 games in the previous 2 seasons.
Yes,
and then
combined.
And then before that, it was very similar in terms of winning like 1 or 2 games a year.
Yeah,
and so it does make sense. They did have that one outlier of a really good season, McIntyre's last year, before he made the right decision to go to Boulder, and then whatever. No,
I had to restart my computer. By the way, he could hear that up and running.
But yeah, no, credit to Brent Brennan. That is.
Who is Brent Brennan?
I remember Brian Brennan, the wide receiver. Are they related to each other? The one that used to play for the Browns?
I feel like they are.
He used to play for the Browns. They might be.
I don't know.
But taking that job is a very difficult, thankless job. In most sports their basketball team being one of them. And we know a guy that went there, Dave Wojcik.
Yeah.
And what they've been able to do, win 4 games so far.
Big deal.
And do it with, you've kind of been asking about it this week, which has been interesting, is that like they'll get up on somebody and they'll just kind of maintain it. They're not going to like have these wild swings where they lose a huge lead or they really come back from one. I mean, when they lost to Nevada, they almost came back, I think. Right.
But that's why this is such a team where there are so many cliches in sports out there, like don't let them hang around. But this is really one of those teams that you don't want to let hang around because they have a way of just kind of managing a game and staying in a game and then just doing enough to pick up a victory. This is by far from one of the more talented teams in the country, but they're doing a lot with what they have. They do have a good quarterback that has been very accurate, hasn't turned the ball over, has made plays when they've needed him to.
He's been the best J. Love quarterback in the conference.
He is absolutely. Jordan Love is not.
Right.
He has been the better Love.
Yeah, Josh Love's been better.
Josh Love has been the better Love than Jordan. And Jordan got all his preseason hype, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year. Hardly anybody's ever talking about Josh Love, and now he's the one that, like a legit contender for Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, at least for a first-team quarterback.
Yeah, yeah.
But at least.
Here's the deal. He can still have a couple of good games and really put himself into that race. Like, by now, he's always just been written off and done, whoever is the starting quarterback at San Jose State. I mean, since maybe David Fales. So it's pretty cool. Just as a straight-up college football fan, it's actually pretty cool to see what they're doing.
And I think if you are a Boise State fan, you have to appreciate that. You have to appreciate the teams that can do something with less. And that is exactly what they've been doing in San Jose. Well, and, I mean, literally less. Like, you think about all the facilities and whatnot, the fact that
they have a grassy knoll.
A literal grassy knoll,
for like half of their stadium.
Yeah.
Like where seats should be now, everybody. Yeah. You're going to see it on game day because the camera angles look right out at it. They just have a grass hill that they put in place instead of stands because nobody was going to their games.
And on the very back side of it, there's a guy that is from the CIA back there.
Just keeping track.
Just every grassy knoll has to have one, right?
Just keeping track.
But yeah, and so I think you have to respect that. I mean, I think Boise State should be and is favored by more than 2 touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes this game's a hell of a lot more interesting than it appeared to be like a month and a half ago.
This was one of those games that when Boise State finally got to flip their crossover schedule and they lost San Diego State and they lost Fresno State and even Nevada, that you're like, oh, San Jose State's back on the schedule. This will be easy.
Right.
And now you're looking at them like San Jose State's definitely better than Nevada. You could probably argue I would still take Fresno State if they played San Jose State straight up. But record-wise, the season that they're having, The Spartans are having a better season than the Bulldogs at the moment.
Yes, they are. Yeah, Fresno State's a whole other discussion.
They are, and they've had really bad quarterback play, or their quarterback just has not been like Marcus McMarion.
Yeah. It would have been tough to replicate it. And actually, their defense has been kind of crappy. But what's always interesting about San Jose, to me, is I always like kind of going back in the, back in the history, right? I like looking back in the past a little bit, because I still think
deep dive,
especially with Boise State, is that they've gained a lot of fans really since 06, but really in the last decade, they've gained a lot of new fans. So anything before that, you like to be a little bit of a hipster and be like, oh, here's a little bit of a history lesson for you kids. Yeah. So I'm writing about it this week. Well, it'll be out in the morning on Thursday, when they played in 2004 in San Jose. And they played at 9 a.m. 9
a.m. Pacific time, correct? Okay.
They played 9 a.m. Pacific. And the game was suitably weird and not very good, but it was 56-49. Boise State won in double overtime. That's the year they went undefeated in the regular season.
Yep.
And it's the year that San Jose State went 2-9. So what's a great equalizer? Getting up at 4:30 in the morning. That is
no joke, by the way.
Yeah.
Because, sure, kickoff is at 9 and we roll out of bed. Actually, I'm going to say on game day, if we were covering the team, we would have been there.
Comparable.
Probably 6 a.m. or something like that. At the time, we were in college, so we were probably barely making it for kickoff, even if we decided, hey, you know what, maybe the second quarter sounds good.
I covered a high school football game that day.
Oh, you did?
I remember it, yeah. Oh. Yeah, because it was just after graduation. But and I came back from the high school game, and I got back to our office, and I was like, what? Looking at the score going like, A, what the hell? B, where's this game?
Yeah.
C, it's still more going on?
Again, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, because one thing I loved about growing up in the Pacific time zone is 9 a.m. That's when games started.
Right.
Now there are like SEC games, the games back out east, but having a 9 a.m. kickoff on the West Coast, I would love to know how many times that's happened since.
I don't know. I don't think it has.
Again, I wouldn't be surprised if it hasn't, because that just sounds it sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, well, and partially what fits into the story and the timing of it is that the Pac-12 considered it this summer.
Good point. Okay.
And so the timing works with the story. You try to be
that was not well received.
A big J journalist. Yeah, not really. And then they floated it at media days, and then about 3 weeks later they said they were going to table it, but they would address it again for next year. And so I talked to some guys that played in that game. None of them would advise it. Let's put it that way. And so, but also, I'll mention it probably briefly in the story. 2 years later, Boise State went down there, again undefeated. That 06, the magic season. They almost lost again down there in 06. It was 20-12 with like 8 minutes left. Then Boise State scored, gets 2-point conversion, and then there's a long Marty Tadman punt return, and they kicked a game-winning field goal.
Yeah.
And so, this isn't the same thing, but I'm just saying weird things have happened in San Jose. I'm just going to say. And Boise State's 13-0 against them all time, so it's not like they've ever lost.
Yeah. He's Dave Southern at The Athletic. I'm Jay Tess, KTB. Where can you, when can we expect to read this, Dave?
Tomorrow, Thursday.
Okay, Thursday morning. It is just a weird place to play.
It is.
I'm not going to, I always feel like, stranger things have happened when we went to Provo, and we kind of, I feel like we did a fair job of putting some people on alert about that game.
Yes.
And that it could be closer because it's tough to win in Provo. We're going to get to that game here in just a moment. But San Jose State, it's just different than just about anywhere else you'll play at the FBS level, because you can hear fans talking.
Yes.
It's you know what I mean? Normally it's just a bunch of noise coming out of the stands, and you probably can't really decipher what for the most part.
Yeah.
But in San Jose, it's second quarter, second and 10 at the 25-yard line, and you could probably hear somebody stand up in the seat and say, "Ain't so windy today, Hurricane Hank."
Some guy just going "Hey,
where's the storm?
Where are we going to dinner after this?"
Seriously.
It's funny you mention that, because literally I was working on that story right before I came here to record the podcast. One of the things I was writing about, putting in that story, was that the players I talked to were like, anytime you go down there, you have to create your own energy. The listed attendance for that game in 04, 9 a.m.
I'm going to go 7,842.
5,028.
Dang it.
And so they talked about creating your own energy. And that worked in 2004.
Okay,
it's the same thing now.
Boise State gets more for their spring football scrimmage than that.
Yeah. So there was a listed attendance of 5,000.
Wow.
And so
I Again, another cliche, but I really do think it holds true.
That you have to. Yes.
It doesn't feel like game day. It almost feels like you're just going out to practice.
Man, you keep on saying things that the story will mention. So there you go. It's going to be a good one. No, but
I haven't even read it yet. I promise.
But I do think that that's what you have to do, and I think that's one of the challenges of going to a place like this. Even in a way, when they've had to go to like New Mexico, in the past, sometimes those have been goofy games because if you don't necessarily start on the right foot or get some momentum, all of a sudden you're looking up at the scoreboard going like, dang.
Look back at the 12 New Mexico game when Boise State even built a big lead and then, kind of came out in halftime a little flat. And
I remember that one.
They barely hung on to win that game thanks to a Tommy Smith tipped pass that ended that thing. Yeah, off Cold Gauchi, because once you can't create it, it's, you just have a tough time getting any momentum. And if you lose it, it's tough to restart it. And I think that, so many times we talk about momentum. Momentum is so crowd driven. I feel like it's the oohs and the ahs, and that's how you kind of get the energy, and that just will be absent.
That's part of why it's tough to play on the road.
Yeah.
There's travel and all that stuff, but that's part of why it's something you can't ever really put your finger on, but it exists.
Yep. Well, Boise State is going to have to try to respond coming off a loss for the first time this season. Generally, in the Bryan Harsin era, the Broncos bounced back pretty well after a loss in their previous game. Heck, there's only been one losing streak.
In 15?
Yeah.
It was the New Mexico Air Force one.
New Mexico Air Force, yep. Yeah, and that's during the regular season, because I guess you could go back, if you count the Baylor game. I mean, I like to kind of confine it to the regular season.
Air Force before that.
I like to kind of confine it to the regular season because you're dealing with Mountain West opponents. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess BYU's not a Mountain West opponent, but still. Month between whatever. I'll use that as the excuse, Dave. Typically, though, they bounce back really well after losses, and despite the fact that we just talked about San Jose State and kind of inflated their brand and what they're doing right now, this is a game where I would expect the Broncos to bounce back, and maybe that helps that there might be guys getting healthy.
Certain guys. One certain guy who I would say instead of 9. 1-9, that would, I don't know. But
he doesn't catch passes.
Yeah. But I think the timing of it, like, there's no such thing as a good timing for a loss. I get it. That's, it would be stupid to say that. Yep. But through talking to guys this week, and I've always been fascinated by that in all the years I've covered this team. And you mentioned to these guys, about what you notice when Boise State teams lose, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing here. I'm always fascinated by how they will respond to a loss, because sometimes, even if you're 6-1, there are some people who think that the sky's falling. Yeah. So how do they bounce back from it? And I think that the fact that they're likely going to get Hank Bachmeier back. Oh man, I said it. Crap. They're likely to get Hank back. They're coming off of a bye. Mm-hmm. All those things kind of seem to work in their favor.
One thing that I'm eager just to see how it plays out too is that everybody could see this on TV, that Rob Mahone left last week's game against BYU. He came back in street clothes. Don't necessarily know what that means for his immediate future. Bryan Harsin said that it's not a season-ending injury, and he would always let us know that if it is a season-ending injury. But I'm kind of curious to see what the offense would look like with a guy like they have in past years, just being the guy. Mm-hmm. Getting the carries, getting in a flow, not necessarily rotating in as much as they have at that position. I'm not a football coach. I have no clue if that makes a difference or not. All that I know is in the past, when they've had these really productive running backs, they've kind of gone with one guy. And I feel like the offense has been better when they've had one guy. That might be different given the talent on this year's roster, but I just want to see what it looks like. I just want to see what it looks like.
And also, it's funny because their hand might be forced into doing that this week. If Mahone can't go, they've talked up Van Buren a lot, but obviously we've seen it's been hit and miss.
Van Buren for me is like such like an interesting player, and he's definitely made some mistakes this year. You go back to the 4th and 1 at UNLV, and the coaches they've seldom single out a single player or say that this is the guy that did this and this is why this went wrong. But we can add it all up, and there was a 4th and 1 at UNLV, and Harsin said that they've ran that play 1,000 times, 1,000 times, and they've talked about it 5,000 times. But who cares? Maybe we need to talk about it 10,000 times. And that the way the play played out, that you can bounce that thing outside, and the way that they see it on replay, that was a touchdown. Andrew was just trying to put his head down and get a first down, and I asked him about that, and he goes, "Yeah, I was just trying to get the first down." And you kind of think like, okay, well, he's not being a selfish player and trying to bounce this thing outside and get more yards. He's trying to move. He's trying to move the chains. I just think he's just had like a weird, awkward start to the season. But I feel like his time is coming. Like I feel like it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
We saw that he's talented last year, Dave.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and people were excited about him coming into the season.
He's stronger. He's leaner. He should be better than he was last year. But we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But I do think it's there. I really do.
Yeah, and he only really got much work in one series against BYU, and it was actually one that ended with the missed field goal. But yeah, and I mean, like I was saying, maybe their hand gets forced into playing him more, and maybe that could end up being a silver lining.
Yeah,
the fact that if this is the way that they can get him involved,
oftentimes,
so be it.
Oftentimes with bigger backs, this isn't always the case, but oftentimes with bigger backs, it is about getting them into the game, getting a few hits, them hitting a few defenders, and getting into that type of rhythm and that type of flow. And he has just really had very little opportunity to do that this year.
And San Jose's run defense isn't very good.
They're not very good.
It's really bad. But
that's one area, though, where now it's time for Boise State to come out and prove it. Now, rush for $174 against BYU, and that looks like a pretty good number on paper, but it did feel a little hollow at the end of the game. Like it didn't feel like they ran for 174. You take on another subpar team, and I think the Boise State would be the first team to tell you they have a size advantage up front when it comes to their offensive line.
Today.
Versus San Jose State's defensive line. So it's time to show who Big Brother is. In all honesty,
because if it's going to happen this year, it's going to happen Saturday, because Wyoming the next week, the Wyoming rush defense is very good the next week. So who knows? Maybe they'll just show up against a really good run defense. I don't know, but we've talked about it. You mentioned BYU, before that Hawaii, before that UNLV. All of those three defenses, I looked it up. They're all like 110th or worst in rush defense still, like right now. And Boise State in all three of those games did fine, but nothing like where you were like, yes, that was it. Because like at the end of the Hawaii game, Holani had a big run. Yeah. And so like you factor that in, like the first 3.5 quarters, not that great. And so that's why each week you look at the matchup and you're like, oh, here they go, and they don't do it.
Yeah. Well,
will they do it this week? I don't know.
Another thing too, look at their road performances so far this season. Yeah, they've won more than they've lost out on the road, and they ended up putting UNLV away by a good number, and they even led by 17 at halftime thanks to that long field goal.
Yes.
By Joel Velasquez.
Yes.
But they started off really slow against Florida State, started off slow against BYU. I know they led at halftime, but it was far from a stellar performance. Yeah. I mean, at least moving the rock.
Right.
Defense was playing okay at that point. So it's. I think that you need to see a fiery, productive start by this Boise State offense in particular on Saturday down at San Jose State, because as we mentioned, San Jose State, you let them hang around, they will make games interesting, and I guarantee it. And so that why if you can get up, I mean, when isn't it nice to get up 2 touchdowns? But you start to get up 2 touchdowns. Push that lead to, if you hold on to a double-digit lead by halftime, I think that you will see a team that pulls away. But there's a sense of urgency to do that this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. And with the way that San Jose State operates, like they don't run the ball well at all whatsoever. But with a quarterback, you look at where they are ranked nationally in terms of passing. He's only been sacked we figured out it was like 6, 7, 8 times.
Yeah,
it's not very many.
Yeah,
and that's pretty good at a place like San Jose State, especially if you're gonna throw it as much as they have. So I think that I think that if they can push the issue a little bit, whether it's getting pressure or making them if they get a 14-point lead, maybe making them have to throw instead of doing it on their terms. Yeah, then you're okay.
Yeah. Another weird thing about this team too, their leading rusher in terms of rushing yards per game is a backup quarterback. I think that's so funny.
Yeah.
And he's actually pretty decent. Like, he's not bad. I'll be eager to see what he looks like when he takes over as the quarterback. I assume it's going to be next year
season,
when Josh Love moves on, because he's a senior. But yeah, I think that to shift our focus maybe a little bit to defense and another theme that has been somewhat reoccurring, and that is, and Bryan Harsin has brought this up almost on a weekly basis, and this is another thing that I asked about, I know that you've asked about and recently wrote about, Dave, and that is everybody's ability from top to bottom of the roster to prepare like they are going to play and make a significant impact on this game. And we asked Bryan Harsin directly about it this week after more than a number of times he has brought it up himself the last few weeks.
Yes.
And he said, without a doubt, you saw that type of stuff play out in their loss against BYU.
Yeah. There were small things that I'm sure we all don't really notice. But he did mention it, and so it was on Monday after the BYU game and before the BYU game on a Monday. He was available once in between that. So
Yeah.
three of the 4 times he's spoken so far, 3 of the last 4, he's brought that subject up, whether it was asked or unprompted. Sometimes he will dovetail into something that we didn't ask about, because I feel like obviously he's speaking to us, but also speaking to his own players.
This is what, I don't even know, Dave. I get it, but like he'll when we talk about dovetailing, like he does this like every now and then where he just goes in a different direction to talk about stuff.
If he has something he wants to say,
but this is like a very like adamant thing that he was like. You could have asked him about field goal kicking, and he felt like he would have. This is what he wanted to talk about.
Somehow, yes.
You know?
Yeah, you're 100% right. But in this situation, he's done that before. But in this situation, you asked him straight up. You were just like about the backups. And Harsin was all about it and had a great response. And to us and to most people, you probably saw Tyreek Jones was the one that kind of missed the assignment where Matt Bushman scored on that 4th down where they did a little fake, like Romney had lost the ball and threw it over the top over him.
And that is such a literal example here. Like there are probably way more examples of this in the game, but this was just an obvious one where there was a backup in for a starter. Keiko Nawahini left. Tyreek Jones came in. They run a fourth and 1 kind of play action trick play, and they catch Tyreek's eyes in the wrong spot, and they hit him for what I mean. It was a 3-point game. I don't know if we can necessarily call that the game-deciding touchdown, but
there was a lot of momentum.
It definitely helped decide the game.
And then like 2-3 plays later, whatever it was, Cord threw an interception.
Yeah. And then they come back and run the other trick play on second down. I think it was second down.
So I mean, it definitely massively shifted things.
Yeah, and the second trick play could have been prevented, but after talking a little bit further with the powers that be about that one, there are certain times, believe it or not, there are certain times where you have to tip your cap to execution, timing, and all that stuff. And that was one of those ones where maybe you do that. The first one, the fourth and 1 was preventable. They had a good play dialed up. Even if they ran it, it looked like they were going to stop it.
Yeah, that looked like it was dead in the water if they would actually run it. And that's what Boise State obviously was. And it was
it's such an all or nothing play too, Dave. Because even if you just lock onto that guy, I'll say this: the quarterback will probably still throw it up to him.
Yeah, you got to try.
He's a big dude. Maybe he does still make a play.
Right.
Doubt it would be for a touchdown because you got to get rid of the ball pretty quick. But that was just a really good example, I guess. And Tyreek's played a lot this year, and he's done a phenomenal job at times filling in. And even at his press conference, Bryan was, he kind of said like something along the lines of, maybe not that exact play, but I don't know. I think we can all put it together. And I know that there are other probably better examples in the eyes of the coaches that this guy didn't do this and he wasn't ready to do this than the obvious one that we're talking about right now. But Bryan was worried about it before the BYU game. And some of those things played out.
You're absolutely right. And I think that with, and so far, I mean, Holani's, made himself pretty clear that he can handle it. But as we get in November, injuries usually tend to happen, even if it's a week or two. So far on defense, 9 of their 11 guys have started every single game. That is not usually very sustainable.
Yeah.
It has been. You don't want anyone to get hurt, obviously. But if you start thinking about it, going like, well, I think they're starting. They think like, hey, if something happens, we need to have certain guys ready, and if they're not, that could come back and bite him. And Harsin actually even said that exact same thing. He basically said it came back to bite him, and it did.
Yeah.
I just think it's really interesting. It's a little bit of an insight that you kind of don't usually get from most coaches, and including here. Sometimes into a view into a team and its psyche that like it's something that clearly they need to work on, and who knows if it got fixed during the bye week. If it did, great for them. We don't know. And so it'll be interesting to see it.
Because we tweet out quotes and stuff during Bryan Harsin's press conference, and I was actually really enjoyed his response to this topic and talking about how everybody sees this team on Saturday for 3.5 hours, and that is usually how a fan base judges the team.
Sure.
But for coaches, for them, I mean, like, yeah, Saturday is huge because that's when you either get the W or the L, and that dictates so much.
Yeah.
But for the coaches, it truly is about Sunday through Friday and how you get guys ready and how you motivate guys and make sure they're prepared. And Harsin on Monday said, like, that's his favorite part of the job. Like, that's what he gets the most joy out of, is trying to get guys to prepare the right way and put them in a good position to go out and perform. And we talked last week about some of the overreaction to maybe that loss, not the game itself, but that the program is mediocre and Harsin should be fired, and those are overreactions. But after kind of tweeting that out, somebody responded to me with, then why isn't he better at it? And you still think like, well, he's won close to 80% of his games since he's been the head coach. I will give fans this, though, and I think this is fair. Like, do they grow from the BYU game to this game? And if they don't, then maybe that is a better time to assess the ability of this team to improve and get better. I do expect them to fully, especially with the bye week. But if they don't, maybe that will warrant more criticism. Or at least validate it a little bit more. Yeah. Certain concerns out there. Yeah,
and I think it's natural after a loss for that to come up. And again, we talk for Boise State, good timing for it, but also bad timing for it is people have had an extra week to think about the loss. Yeah. Right. And so you're going to be critical naturally, and that's what we as Big J journalists do sometimes. You sometimes have to be critical. We don't work for the team, okay?
Yep.
And so, yeah, there's been more time to analyze that. So maybe there's some recency thinking like, oh, everyone thinks they're so terrible. Chill. No, they're very good. I think they're a very good team. I do. Did I think they'd run the table? Probably not. I said they go 11-1. And someone asked me that, like, before the BYU loss. When I did my mid-season thing, that was my prediction. I'll still stand by it.
Yeah.
If you asked me before the season, I probably would have said 10-2. But the way the team's played during the year, I'd say 11-1.
Yeah.
And if you think that is being negative, that is incorrect.
That's crazy.
No, because I still think they're a good team and everything like that. And I think they'll bounce back, like you were saying. Just some of the
it is an awkward
time. The criticism can be loud because I'm sorry, there's nothing else to go off of more recently. And so sometimes you got to be like, what happened? Because losses aren't common. So, yes, sometimes you focus on that because it's just kind of like, it's so rare. It's just like, well, how did this happen? No one was sitting there going like, let's discuss for 5 straight days why they beat Marshall 14-7. Everyone's just like, nah, they beat them. Let's move on. That's how it is. That is how it is.
Yeah. Another thing that I have been somewhat eager to talk about, just because it took me a while to look this up. I know that this team has had a lack of turnovers, and we talked about this. We've talked about this before, but we actually really talked about this with a couple of the players this week. And to kind of paraphrase what Avery Williams, starting junior cornerback, said, is that it is our job to. He said this way more intellectually than I am about to. It is our job to do our job. Like, you worry about covering your man and doing your job. And then those are like the way that I interpret that is then if interceptions or turnovers become possible after that, that's what you do. You do your job, and then maybe the byproduct is being in the right spot to get a pick. One thing, Dave, like, in maybe I'm just wrong here. And I know that players and coaches see the game much differently than we do, and maybe it's just breaking on a certain pass a little bit quicker or something like that. I don't feel like Boise State's dropped a ton of interceptions this year.
I don't either. I know they mentioned that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I mean, there were like 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
That was a problem.
Yeah, well, maybe no, 3.
I think it was 3 years ago.
16, right?
Yeah.
They dropped a lot.
Or they dropped interceptions.
They were ones where you were like,
Jonathan Moxey, great cornerback, but he had a tough time actually, finishing it and holding on to the ball.
Yes.
Great cornerback, but
yes, that when that was an issue, they dropped a lot. I haven't seen that many this year.
I really haven't. So I really do think they see the game differently than maybe we do at home. And there are certain instances where, man, they should be breaking on this a little sooner or something like that.
And their pass efficiency defense isn't that bad.
Isn't that bad.
Which interceptions really help that.
Yeah, exactly.
And despite that, they've still been good in terms of completion percentage, getting teams out the field and third down and all that stuff. So I know that they've said that, but I've kind of been hard pressed to think of many where they should have been a pick.
But okay, there is like this trade off, and I've alluded to this in the past, but I decided to look it up during the bye week. And so if Boise State allows a 20-yard gain on a drive, there's been 22 drives this year where Boise State has allowed at least one 20-yard play on offense. And if they allow if the Boise State defense allows a 20-yard play to an opposing offense, that opposing offense has about an 80% chance of scoring points. If Boise State doesn't allow a 20-yard play on a drive, and that's happened on 70 drives this year, the opponents have about a 7% chance of scoring a touchdown.
Damn, that's good.
That's good. There is a fine line between being too aggressive and going off and getting interceptions and then potentially allowing big plays. I think that while Boise State continues to echo the thought that we can get more interceptions, we can do a few things better, they're also, I believe, not willing to jeopardize or sacrifice allowing big plays just in order to try to make a couple of more interceptions or anything like that.
You want to know a defense that didn't want to give up big plays and has done a good job of not doing that?
Who's that?
BYU.
True.
And
it worked against Boise State.
They did get 2 picks, but that was how their defense was built.
Is not giving up big plays. And Boise State's offense, you could flip the numbers, and Boise State's offensive efficiency is very similar to that.
I think when you mentioned that to Zach today, Zach had this knowing look on his face.
Yeah, he's like if we can get some explosives, then we are a freaking dangerous offense.
And they didn't.
And they really struggled to. And they, when they were down, what was it? 18 points, and they were getting big chunks there for a second, but it was almost kind of that too little too late sort of ordeal.
Yeah. See? And I said to you yesterday, I was like, how the hell did you find that stat? And B, I don't know if I would have the patience. And I know I'd miss like one drive and it would throw everything off. And I'd be like,
I missed one drive. Yeah. It's one of those things where you maybe multitask while you're watching some college football on your day, on a bye Saturday or whatever it is. Because it came across your mind during a game week and you're like, I'm not looking that up. That
was good. Week. I mean, that's great.
Yeah. So I do think that there is value there. Like, it is okay for this defense to be a defense that just makes it really difficult for opponents to move the ball. Turnovers are nice, and that's why I do think it is important to almost even separate fumbles and interceptions, Dave, because even if you're not allowing big plays, you can still go after the football. I mean, you can still force fumbles, and regardless of where you're at on the field. You don't really have to take too many risks to force a fumble. I mean, I guess if it's a big moment and you're trying to go for a strip instead of a tackle, maybe then.
Right.
But for interceptions, you have to like come up and maybe try to make a play, and then somebody gets behind you, or
catch it out of the air instead of off the ground.
True. Yeah, there's just a little bit more of a gamble I think you have to take when you're getting interceptions versus forcing fumbles. And Boise State, they have 6 forced fumbles or 6 fumbles recovered this year. They have more forced fumbles than that. So that number is actually okay.
And actually, too, when you talk about, like, this isn't like an analytics thing, but, like, there is some luck involved in fumbles.
There are.
Their luck last year was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was really good.
And so if it kind of goes the other way, you're saying, you have to sometimes be a little more, energetic in terms of getting interceptions.
I guess the point of it is that I guess we can't, bat an eye to some of the stuff they're doing well and only focus on like why they aren't doing this.
Right.
You know?
And also too, the way, and I know this for a fact, Jeff Schmedding, when he talks about getting turnovers, he considers a fourth down stop a turnover.
And he should.
And they
why wouldn't
they
you?
were awesome at it, except there were two. They were
BYU.
both against BYU. But that's also been a factor in why like they haven't quite had the turnovers. And like I don't think
Actually, I'm glad you
not
brought
many
this up,
people have
Dave.
probably looked at this defense and been like, ooh.
I'm actually okay. So this is another way I think that you can look at this, and that's that Boise State is on pace, I believe, for the second fewest defensive snaps of the Bryan Harsin era. And what that says to me, though, is that, okay, this team isn't getting a lot of turnovers, but they are getting off the field for the most part. Good on third down, for the most part. Good on fourth down.
Yep. They're still what, top
they're
10, top 5
in what? In
third
in
down
third down percentage, I'm almost
it's like
positive.
7th.
Yeah.
I think they're like 7th. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's
they're top 5.
Yeah.
26.9. And you look at the teams in front of them: Wisconsin, Kansas State, Utah, and Ohio State. All teams that are either in the top 25 or flirting with the top 25,
or just beat a top 5 team.
Yeah. Yep.
K-State. So there you go. I mean, so like, yeah, so like, and I put it in there about what does Boise State need to do better, like in November, is get more turnovers, just because that would really help a lot of things out. Like, especially like so far the special teams hasn't quite shown they can flip a field. That getting those turnovers, creating shorter fields for its own offense will only be beneficial. So yes, I think they should get more. They probably will, but I don't think it's the panic button.
I don't think I think you continue to do what you do and hope you can do it with a little better efficiency and technique. But let's just say this: you don't all of a sudden run out a 3-1-7 defense. Hey, Mike Sharp.
What's up, buddy? Oh man,
kind of kidding, not kidding.
It was especially timely you mentioned that with the NCAA stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, if that video game ever comes back. Well, now we can play online. So Sharp, you know, when we lived together, I'd be offense, he'd be defense, hand the controller off. Now he can be at his house, and I can be at my house. We can rock it.
Yeah, friend of the
and you can play special teams.
Friend of the program, by the way.
Program.
Yeah, the old NCAA video game. We got the offensive coordinator over here. Mike was the DC, and he had this 3-1-7 defense that he implemented back then. And just to like really bring this thing full circle, this past week, LSU was playing Auburn, and Auburn implemented this new defense against LSU's vaunted passing attack, and it worked.
It worked.
I mean, about as good as it could.
Yeah.
LSU only scored 23 points, which for them is
way below average because they were scoring like 50.
Yeah, they've been incredible this year. So yeah, just to kind of wrap in on like a little inside joke
baseball,
there.
Inside football.
Yeah, inside football.
Real quick, can we? Before we go, can I mention you had a video of it? I think it was during the bye.
Okay.
That kid from Bora.
Austin Bolt.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, like
you could just leave that. You could like literally leave the assessment of that video at that right there.
Yeah,
Dave.
I think it was during the bye, wasn't it?
It was during the bye.
Because I was
past week.
I was at my
parents.
I was at my parents' house, and I was like, holy crap, you got to see this. And of course, my mom's like, is he going to Boise State? I don't know, but he's he didn't even score a touchdown.
He didn't even score a touchdown. It was like a 26-yard run. He probably ran close to 100 yards on.
Yeah. Was that the only play of the game he didn't score a touchdown on?
It probably.
God, he's had games this year where it scores like 5 or 6 of them in like weird, in like 4 different ways.
Austin Bolt, so he's a senior over at Bora High School. He's probably going to be like a tight end, maybe an outside backer at the next level, the collegiate level. Right now he's playing quarterback for his team, though, because he's the best athlete on the field, and he's giving them that just gives his team the best chance to win. Oh, by the way, they are 7-2. They have a first-round bye at the state playoffs, something that Bora hasn't experienced in quite a long time. Yeah. And so he's really carried this team on their back. And talking with some of the other coaches around the 5A SIC, he's just one of those guys. Like, it's just so hard to prepare for him in practice because nobody else has a 6'4", 220-pound quarterback that's athletic, agile, and tough to bring down. And now Austin's actually becoming like more confident as a thrower.
Yeah.
He threw for 330 a couple weeks ago against Mountain View in a road upset. And so, yeah, that run was incredible. And in that game, he ran for 3 touchdowns. He passed for 3 touchdowns. And near the end of the second quarter, when things were getting a little out of hand, you could tell that he was eager to maybe play a more natural position, which is wide out or tight end. And coach threw him out there at wide receiver for one play, Dave. For one play. And guess what happened?
He dropped the ball. I'm just kidding.
33-yard touchdown.
Dang. See,
So again, three passing, 3 rushing, and 1 receiving in one varsity 5A football game.
so he earns the
Man.
Jay and Dave Sports Bar High School Football Player of the Week for the 4th straight week. Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah, he'll be the 5A state player of the year.
very, very.
If anybody else is, I'm sorry. There's some really good players out there, but
not a lot of athletes like that I've seen around here
unique.
in a
and
while.
Boise State is recruiting him. They've offered
Yes.
him. So is Utah State. Utah State was kind of the first one to offer Austin, and I really do think that means something to him. Staying at home and playing on the blue would be awfully cool, but there are some bigger programs knocking on the door. It's so funny because I know Will Hall and myself, when we tweet out certain things, highlights of them, interviews, whatever it is, you'll get like an alert and you'll be like, Baylor's recruiting coordinator.
Yeah.
Why did he like that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
There weird little things like that happen. So you wonder if his recruitment is going to start to blow up, if it already hasn't, and really talented player.
And C of I won again.
C of I, man. Just a wagon right now.
Wagon.
Yeah. I mean, they've been incredible. 13 in a row. They continue to be undefeated. They had never won before at Southern Oregon, and they won by 28. Man. Darius James Peterson, 5 touchdowns, school record, over 6,000 passing yards, 3,000 rushing yards that he eclipsed for his career in that game. Coach Mo and his team has got it rolling, and now all of a sudden – it's fun covering Boise State, but like we really are going to have to start thinking about like what happens if College of Idaho makes a run at the playoffs here.
I think a lot of those guys on that team still remember your motivational speech.
Yeah, that's what it is. From 2 years ago, Coach Mo called me out. I don't even know what I said. Blacked out for a moment. But clearly the benefits are paying off right now.
Yeah, they remember that. You were very prepared. I was
very prepared. I was ready to ask Darius James Peterson a few questions, wound up in front of the team. But it was cool. So, yeah. Idaho off a bye. See if they can get going again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
they got Cal Poly.
Yeah, they sat actually through a bye week with a nice victory over Idaho State.
Run that option.
Yeah. Cal Poly.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But any last words, Dave? Again, read that article tomorrow.
Read the story about that goofy 04 game. Mm-hmm. I think it was pretty fun talking to some of those guys. I think they once the game's far enough away, they can
feel
have
more
those
open and honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
those are always fun moments.
Yep.
So we will be headed down there. Will's hitting the road this week. I'll be back here in the studio, but we'll be live pregame show taking you up to kickoff. Dave will be there. The Broncos will be there, and we'll see if Boise State can put one in the win column and get this thing back in the right direction. So, boom. All right.
Boom.
We'll see you guys next week here on Jay and Dave's Sports Bar, serving the Idaho sports community.